at the beginning of the 1800s. In small towns across America, people lived by farming. Hand tools and old methods were all they had. But one night, a mysterious ship arrived from England at the harbor. Inside the ship were strange iron parts and machines that frightened people. "What on earth is this?" Within just a few months, these machines began to change the face of America. Where once people worked endlessly by hand, now machines produced cloth, iron tools, and thousands of goods at lightning speed. And this was the beginning of the Industrial Revolution in America, around the 1790s. America was still a farming nation. People worked in the fields, spun cloth by hand, and used old-fashioned tools. Life in small towns was quiet and simple. But one big question began to rise. Could machines work faster than people? At that very moment, a man from England arrived, Samuel Slater. He didn't bring heavy machines with him. What he carried was even more powerful: the knowledge of how England's textile mills worked. You see, back then, England had strict laws. Factory designs and secrets could not leave the country. But Slater memorized everything and brought it across the ocean in his mind. In 1793, in Rhode Island, he built America's very first large textile mill. It was powered by water, and suddenly thread was being spun faster than anyone had ever seen before. What once took days could now be done in hours. Soon, news of this success spread across America. Textile mills popped up along rivers in New England. Factories for iron tools, paper, sugar, and even weapons began to appear. New inventions like the spinning jenny, the power loom, and later steam power changed everything. Small towns transformed into factory towns. The sounds of machines, the smoke from chimneys, the rush of workers. This became the new face of America. But there was a darker side. Workers were pushed to labor 12 to 14 hours a day. Women and even children were sent into the factories. The peace of the countryside was replaced by the noise and exhaustion of city life. Still, these early factories reshaped America's future. People realized farming was no longer the only way forward. Machines would define the new age. While businessmen grew rich, the whole society began marching toward an industrial future. From Samuel Slater's first mill grew thousands of factories. And with them, a new America. This was the true beginning of the Industrial Revolution in America, in the early 1800s. Making cloth in America was a slow and difficult process. Cotton grew in the fields, but separating seeds and spinning thread took weeks. Every home had a spinning wheel, but growing demand for cloth could not be met. People wondered, could cloth ever be made faster and cheaper? In 1793, a man named Eli Whitney changed everything. He invented a machine called the cotton gin. This small machine could remove seeds from cotton so fast that what 10 workers did in a full day, the cotton gin could do in minutes. This one invention transformed the cotton industry across America. With raw cotton now plentiful, textile mills in New England began to grow rapidly. Powered first by water, and later by steam, these factories used machines like power looms and spinning frames to produce cloth quickly and cheaply. People were amazed at how fast and efficiently cloth could be made. Workers from rural towns moved to cities for jobs. Small towns transformed into factory towns. The noise of machines, smoke rising from chimneys, and the rush of thousands of workers. This was the new face of America. But the boom came with a cost. Factory workers labored 12 to 14 hours a day. Women and children also worked long hours at the machines. Low wages, constant noise, and exhaustion became their everyday reality. Still, the textile industry reshaped America's economy. Cotton plantations in the South expanded, and northern factories turned cotton into cloth to supply the nation and even the world. The textile industry was doing more than producing cloth. It was building America's industrial future. This was the textile industry boom, the force that drove the Industrial Revolution forward, and forever changed the face of the nation. In the early 1800s, travel in America was long and difficult. Getting from town to town depended on horses, wagons, and boats. Transporting goods could take weeks. People began to wonder, could there ever be a force that changes the speed of travel and shipping? At that time, James Watt and other engineers started harnessing the power of steam. The steam engine gave machines and factories the ability to work faster than ever before. For the first time, factories didn't rely only on water power. Steam engines increased the speed of mills, mines, and industrial equipment, transforming the way work was done. Soon, steam power became the driving force behind trains. By the 1820s and 1830s, the first railroads appeared in America. Trains made travel and transporting goods incredibly fast. Routes that once took weeks could now be completed in hours. Railroads connected factory towns, farms, and big cities. Iron and wooden bridges were built, stations opened. And even small towns became linked to major cities. Factories could now easily receive raw materials and deliver finished products to every corner of the country. Steam engines and railroads didn't just boost industry, they changed people's lives. Trade grew in distant cities, new businesses started, and ordinary people could travel faster and farther than ever before. Steam power and railroads turned America into a connected and industrial nation. Travel between towns and cities became easier. Goods and people moved faster, and the country was filled with new energy and opportunity. This was the magic of steam engines and trains. They didn't just speed up travel, they helped drive the Industrial Revolution forward, and forever changed the face of America. In 1793, cotton was being grown across America, but there was a big problem. Separating the seeds from cotton was slow and very labor-intensive. Workers toiled day and night, yet cotton production remained slow and expensive. People wondered, could there ever be a machine that makes this work faster and easier? Then came Eli Whitney, a young inventor. He built a small but powerful machine called the cotton gin. This machine could remove seeds from cotton so quickly that what 10 workers would do in a full day, the cotton gin could do in minutes. This invention completely changed cotton farming. Cotton could now be prepared faster and at lower cost. Farmers were thrilled, and cotton production skyrocketed. The cotton gin didn't just transform farming. It completely changed the textile industry and American industry as a whole. New factories sprang up. Raw cotton became easier to process, so textile mills could produce cloth much faster. The textile boom created jobs and led to the growth of factory towns. Plantations in the southern states expanded dramatically. Cotton farming increased so much that slavery deepened in the South. Meanwhile, northern factories used this raw cotton to make cheap cloth and sell it across the country and even internationally. Eli Whitney's small machine sparked big changes. Cotton farming, the textile industry, and the American economy were all transformed. Workers and farmers could produce much more in less time. The cotton gin's power lay in the fact that one invention could change both agriculture and industry, pushing the Industrial Revolution forward. And that is the story of the cotton gin. Eli Whitney's machine didn't just separate seeds, it changed the economic face of the nation. Cotton farming and industry together paved the way for America's Industrial Revolution. Between the late 1800s and early 1900s, making goods in America was slow and expensive. One person could work all day, but the amount of product made was small and costly. People began to wonder, could there ever be a way to make things faster and cheaper? At that time, inventors and industrialists started thinking about solutions. Their goal was to produce goods quickly and at lower cost. This idea gave birth to mass production. Mass production meant making large quantities of the same product, with machines working continuously and efficiently. The real revolution came with the assembly line. Henry Ford used it to build cars. Before the assembly line, making a car took weeks or even months. The assembly line changed everything. Work was broken down into small steps, and each worker focused on just one task. This saved a lot of time, sped up production, and reduced costs. Not just cars. Tools, clothes, machines, and other goods could now be produced quickly and cheaply. Mass production and assembly lines transformed America's factories and its economy. Goods started reaching every household. Items that were once expensive and rare became affordable for ordinary people. Factory towns grew, employment opportunities increased, and the country rapidly became industrial and modern. Machines made work easier, increased production, and lowered prices. The assembly line and mass production worked their magic during the Industrial Revolution. This is the story of how machines made goods faster and cheaper. Mass production and the assembly line didn't just change products. They changed society and the face of industry forever. Between the 1800s and early 1900s, life in America was changing rapidly. In villages, people still depended on farming and traditional work. But slowly, something new began to emerge. People started asking, could cities offer a new life and new work opportunities? The Industrial Revolution changed the landscape of villages and cities. New factories began to open, mostly in urban areas. Textile mills, ironworks, and other industries started providing jobs. In villages, farmers worked hard, but opportunities were limited. Cities offered steady wages, regular work, and new possibilities. So people left their villages and moved towards cities. Cities grew rapidly. Factory towns expanded into large urban centers. Railroads and steam engines connected villages and cities. Raw materials, goods, and finished products could now move easily to cities. New immigrants also arrived, creating diverse urban communities. The Industrial Revolution not only increased production, it also changed where and how people lived and worked. Urbanization wasn't easy. Cities faced crowded living conditions, pollution, and limited housing. Still, people chose city life for better opportunities and a chance at a new future. Factories provided employment, trade and commerce grew, and people began adapting to a modern urban lifestyle. This is the story of how people moved from villages to cities. Urbanization didn't just change geography. It transformed the social and economic structure of America forever. Between the 1800s and early 1900s, factories in America were growing rapidly. New machines, assembly lines, and mass production made work faster. But the question was, whose hard work was powering this speed? Many children, some as young as 6 or 7, started working in factories. Their jobs included small tasks, standing by machines, handling threads, cotton, or tools. They worked long hours, 12 to 14 hours a day. Young children worked near heavy and dangerous machines, and injuries were common. Adult workers weren't safe either. Machines ran at high speed, factories were filled with smoke and fumes. There were very few breaks, poor lighting, and cramped spaces. Accidents and injuries were normal. Factory owners often paid low wages, leaving workers with almost no choice. Factories provided employment, but life was harsh. The success of the Industrial Revolution came at a huge human cost. Over time, people began to notice this injustice. Reformers raised their voices for the rights of children and workers. Labor laws and regulations were introduced to reduce working hours and improve safety. But by then, the Industrial Revolution had already changed the lives of many children and workers. Their hard work and struggles kept machines and factories running, and helped grow America's economy. This is the story of how children and workers faced harsh conditions in factories. The Industrial Revolution brought progress, but the human cost and hardships should never be forgotten. Between the 1800s and early 1900s, industries in America were growing rapidly. Factories, railroads, and mass production were changing the country. But the question was, who was making the most money from this industrial boom? Some entrepreneurs saw the opportunity. They left small businesses behind and invested in large industries. Big factories were built in iron, steel, oil, and textile industries. Companies like Standard Oil and Carnegie Steel were born. These businessmen controlled entire industries and became very wealthy. Capitalism opened the way, where hard work, investment, and strategy could make some people extremely rich. The big industrialists and wealthy families were known for their power and fortune. They lived in huge mansions, bought luxury cars, and wore fashionable clothes. Education and social status were under their influence. Their families held respect and influence in society. The industries and money were in their hands, while ordinary workers only labored. Big business changed both the economy and society. Urbanization, factories, and trade grew rapidly. But the wealth gap also increased. Wealthy families and businessmen began influencing political and social decisions. The Industrial Revolution and capitalism created a new social and economic order. This is the story of how big industrialists and wealthy families rose in America. Capitalism brought economic growth, but it also created new disparities in wealth and power. Between the 1800s and early 1900s, the Industrial Revolution was transforming America. But the question was, could new technology and inventions make work and life even faster? First came the telegraph. Invented by Samuel Morse in the 1830s. The telegraph connected distant cities and even countries. Messages that once took days or weeks could now be sent in minutes. Business, trade, and government decisions became much faster. Machinery also transformed production. Steam engines and automated machines made factories more efficient. The discovery of steel allowed stronger buildings, bridges, and railroads. Factories could now produce goods on a massive scale. And cities grew as industrialization and urbanization accelerated. Electricity changed the world even further. Light bulbs, electric machines, and telephones made work and life easier. Factories could operate day and night. Communication, transportation, and everyday life became much more efficient. Technological innovations took the Industrial Revolution to a whole new level. This is the story of how the telegraph, machinery, steel, and electricity transformed America's Industrial Revolution. New technology didn't just change industry, it completely changed society and the way people lived. Between the 1800s and early 1900s, the Industrial Revolution swept across America. But the question was, would this change be limited to industry, or would it transform the entire nation? The Industrial Revolution exploded the American economy. Factories, mass production, and new inventions made products faster and cheaper. Trade and commerce expanded, and new jobs were created. Cities grew rapidly, and American industries gained recognition in global trade. Capitalism and big business turned the country into an economic powerhouse. Industrialization also transformed society. Urbanization drew people from villages to cities. Education, skills, and labor movements began changing the lives of ordinary workers. Awareness grew about child labor and harsh working conditions. Women and immigrants started joining the workforce. Society gradually became modern and industrial. The Industrial Revolution made America a global power, leading in manufacturing, technology, and trade. The country became a new economic and political force in the world. Urbanization, transportation, and technological innovations laid the foundation for modern America. This is the story of how the Industrial Revolution transformed America into a global power. It didn't just change industry. It reshaped the economy, society, and America's position in the world forever.